Welcome to the Attention Deficit Disorder Expert Podcast Series by Attitude Magazine.
Everyone, welcome. It's Susan Kaufman here today with Attitude Magazine's weekly ADHD Experts broadcast. Today's topic is a really important one. It's bullying, which is, I don't need to tell those of you who are listening in, a very serious issue for many children with attentional or other learning differences. Kids with ADHD and LDs are just prime targets for school bullies in the classroom, at lunch. Recess is a big time for bullying. Anything from receiving accommodations to weak social skills or just being considered different can attract the bullies. Kids who are bullied may come to dread going to school. They may suffer low self-esteem and academic performance. It's a really serious issue. So today I'm especially pleased to welcome expert Dr. Michele Borba to tell us about why children with ADHD often fall victim to bullies and how to detect signs that your child may be the victim of bullying. And she'll also talk to us about strategies that you and your child can use to end bullying. And then finally, what if your own child is a bully? How can you cope with that? Let me introduce Dr. Michele Borba. We're so honored to have her today. She is an internationally recognized educational psychologist and an expert in parenting, bullying, and character development. She's also a former special education teacher herself and the mom of 3. She is the author of 22 books, including some really wonderful ones. Her latest book, which was just released in June, is called Unselfie: Why Empathetic Kids Succeed in Our All About Me World. This book is the source for much of the web basis of her webinar today. You can find it in your bookstore, online, and find out much more about Dr. Borba on her website, michelleborba.com. That's B-O-R-B-A, or follow her on Twitter at Michele Borba. I want to give a big shout out and thank you to the sponsor also of today's webinar. That's Play Attention. It's the one brain training system that combines both neurofeedback and cognitive training to improve attention, social skills, behavior, and a lot more in both children and adults with ADHD. For more information on screen time with Play Attention and how it can help improve skills and impulse control, visit their website. It's www.playattention.com. So thank you to Play Attention. So with that, let me turn it over to you, Dr. Borba, and thank you so much again for being here today.
Oh, you are so welcome, and thank you for all of you tuning in and listening. Bullying has been one of my biggest concerns, not only back in the special education classroom, but right now what I do is I work around the world on how to stop bullying and what we can do to help our kids just have a more successful, happier life. First thing we need to do is realize what bullying really is. As a parent, it's critical that you understand, because it is not teasing. The first thing you may want to do is go onto your school's website and recognize whether or not they do have an anti-bullying policy and what the process is for you to report bullying. But even before you report, let's be very clear together. This is the most common definition of bullying, and it has these criteria. All of them are critical that you know. First, it's almost always a pattern. And why that's concerning is that because it's a pattern, if your child is bullied once, almost always he's usually bullied again. It's repeated. That's why we've got to stop this ASAP. It's always something that's delivered like cold-blooded cruelty that's with negative intent, and it's always intentional cruelty. This isn't an accident where a child deliberately just trips another child but pushes him. It could be verbal, it can be sexual, it could be emotional harassment, it can also be physical. And you'll see that there's different kinds of bullying along the way. Younger children are more likely to engage in physical bullying. Older children more likely to engage in online bullying. But no, it's always a repeated process, and it's always a dysfunctional relationship. The final thing is, keep this in mind. It's always one-sided. That means if your child is bullied, he can't hold his own. And that's why adults, we need to step in and we need to understand bullies deliberately choose kids who are more vulnerable by nature, easier targets. That's why ADHD kids are very often the child who's going to be picked on. Let's keep going and let's look at some other things of why is a child with ADHD a child most often to be bullied. And here's some things to keep in mind. First of all, we know that ADHD children are almost always a little bit more impulsive. And a child who's more impulsive is going to be a child who's going to be an easier target. Children who have fewer friends are always easier targets, because if you have a base of support, then a bully is going to be less likely to pick on you because there's going to be somebody who may be there to stick up for you. Children who have ADHD sometimes are quicker to anger. And if you keep in mind that a bully really is a child who usually lacks empathy, so they enjoy causing another child pain, and they enjoy a child who's quick to anger, quick to cry, and they'll pick on you again. A child who does a little bit more annoying behaviors, who stands out. Maybe he flaps his arms, or maybe he repeats, or maybe he tries to clown. Those are always also attention-getting behaviors, are ones that a bully will pick on again. And we notice something that's really an interesting point. That is, the American Psychological Association did a study of looking at hundreds of different studies on bullying. Who's a child most likely to be either a bully or a child who is bullied? And interestingly enough, a lot of the commonality was a child with weak problem-solving skills, doesn't know what to do. And you look at those, they may be a child who has ADHD or those symptoms. So now what do we do, and why should we worry? Here's some other things to keep in mind. There's some hidden dangers of bullying, and that is these ones of why we need to stop it, and we need to be very, very intentional about looking for signs. My first concern is that it will endanger your child's empathy or those who are watching. The more he is picked on or the more he's bullied, the more likely his empathy will diminish, his ability to feel for another person, because he's in survival mode and he needs to think for himself. He needs to stay tuned for himself. His mental health, his stress will begin to go up. His self-esteem will begin to go down. Those are huge dangers. We know a lot of children who continue to be bullied actually begin to have symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder. It's a big concern that I had as a mental health professional. We're also looking at another one. We said that their self-esteem will go down, but you'll begin to see that he begins to really feel so poorly and negatively about himself. He may already be feeling poorly and negatively about himself. Children who are bullied also assume that they did something to cause it, and it's really key that we keep in mind the children almost never do anything to cause it. They're just easier targets, and that's why they're picked on so easily. There are also children who, because they're bullied, they lack their ability to concentrate, which is already hard for an ADHD child, begins to go down. So their school work begins to plummet. They can't focus because their biggest is, how am I going to survive out there on the playground? Or what's going to happen to me when I get on the bus? So their ability to bounce back and the resilience also plummets as well. And their relationship with others begins to plummet. I did a fascinating study just last week. I was on the Wall Street Journal article, and we discovered that children who are more liked with others are also kids who have empathy and less likely to be picked on. Empathy, I am also convinced, is our best antidote to bullying, and that is to mobilize the 85% of kids on a school campus who aren't the bully, who aren't the victim, who are actually watching and monitoring this. And if we mobilize them to be able to step in, that's our best hope. I've done Dateline specials on this. My book on Selfie has dozens of strategies, not only how to reduce stress, but also how to mobilize the courage of kids on our school campus so they can step in. Empathy is really being able to feel with another human being. And if you keep that in mind, it's impossible to bully another child if you can feel with that person and know, how would I feel if that happened to me? So what are we going to do about it? We're going to stand up as a group of parents and teachers. And the first thing is we're going to look much more closely at signs of bullying, because here's the thing that we need to keep in mind. I'm going to go backwards on 2 slides, Susan. They're going too quickly for me. Just one of what signs are that are bullying, one before. Thank you so much. Here's some things to keep in mind on bullying. One thing that we need to really remember is that usually our kids don't come and tell us they've been bullied. By around the 3rd grade, the tragedy is they don't come and tell very often an adult. Why? Because they're embarrassed, fear of humiliation. They're so concerned that you're going to call up that bully's parent and the bullying is only going to get worse. And they also tell us, when I've done focus groups with hundreds of kids, that the advice that we give them is often not good advice. Don't worry about it. It'll get better, when it often doesn't. So that's why what you're going to do is start looking at signs. And here's some ones to keep in mind. First, start looking at patterns, unexpected marks that continue to be there, not just for one time, but keep coming up over and over again. Apologies, Susan, that just keeps going back and forth. But here's some other ones. This is a pattern that your child may have a loss of toys or clothing or money. Keep this one in mind, that sometimes bullies use extortion. So don't let your child bring those pricey things to school, or make sure that they're locked up and well, because they can be something that your child will be bullied for. Your little outdoorsy child, little Miss Sunshine, who just used to love school, all of a sudden wants to avoid school, becomes a little more clingy. He starts to say, I don't want to go to that soccer game, Mom, or I don't want to go to school today. He suddenly becomes sullen, or he suddenly becomes evasive. You're looking for a change in your child's normal. You know your child better than anybody else. Start realizing that when you see a dip, it may be bullying, it may be something else, but if that dip continues, that change in that child's normal behavior lasts, particularly every day, for about 2 weeks, don't wait. Get help. And if there's any time where your child is physically in danger, then you don't wait at all. You get down there to that school immediately. You see any kind of personality change, but also start looking at physical complaints. The Mayo Clinic began to see that a lot of those illnesses, their immune system of our kids goes down. Sudden colds, he can't sleep, he gets that headache, and it's reoccurrent. It could be much more than just an illness. It could be that his immune system is gone, his resilience is gone, and that's what he's fighting. Watch sleep patterns. He can't sleep, or he sleeps very long and he wants to stay in bed. Another thing that we're noticing is the change that the APA began to tell us is that our children who were bullied begin to bully others. And very often the first one they begin to bully, because bullying is learned and it can be unlearned. But once they begin to bully, very often they flip. 13% of kids who were bullied become bullies. So that's why you've got to watch it, because they want to step in and they want to help themselves. So if you see that a younger sibling is starting to be bullied, another one that's really interesting that I always tell parents, and they look at me with their mouth wide open, is they run home and use the restroom. Why? Because there's certain spots that we're going to talk about that are hot button issues where bullying is most likely to happen. And very often the restroom in the school is one of the areas where our kids feel least safe. Or do they run home and use the refrigerator because they're so hungry and they're famished? Now, any one of these can be a sign of something else. But one thing I really would urge you to do is start tracking these. Just get a little calendar and an agenda. You don't have to have your child watch you do this, but start watching for patterns. Use the medical model. Just when you go to a doctor and you say, here's what I'm seeing and changes in my child, do the same thing if here's what I'm seeing and changes in behavior in my child. And the other thing that is really key that I would strongly urge you to do is bullying doesn't happen all the time and everywhere. Bullying is situational. So start to notice, are there certain days when the behavior is more pronounced, or certain times when the behavior is more pronounced? Very often that's when the bullying is most likely to occur. So let's keep going. And now let's look at, so what are we going to do to stop bullying? What we do know is that our children are desperately saying to us that they want someone to tell them what to do, how to stand up to a bully. And actually standing up to a bully is the hardest thing possible. So there's other possibilities you can do. What you're trying to do above all else is help your child create a safety net or feel safer. And here's some strategies you may want to try. Not every one of these strategies will work, because bullying prevention strategies aren't the cookie cutter approach. This one will work, try this one or this one. Instead, what you have to do is figure out your child's temperament, gender, the situation. And the more information you can find out about that bullying phenomenon, where it's happening and when, you're going to be more likely to help your child. So write down a few of these ideas. They're all in my book on Selfie. But again, what you may want to do also is, if you really know there's bullying happening, get to that teacher conference immediately. Point out, here's what I'm seeing. Here's what I'm concerned about. And then at that teacher conference, use the keyword, what can we do? You want to work together with your child and that teacher. Here's some ideas. Number one, bullying happens in certain spots, not all spots. So the first thing you want to do, I'm going backwards again, please. Just do the first number one, Susan. The first thing you want to do is calmly ask your child, where did this happen? Now, here's some things you need to know. Just fascinating information. We've looked at hundreds and hundreds of pieces of data on bullying to find are certain locations at a school spot or at a park or at the daycare where bullying is most likely to happen. And yes, we now know it doesn't happen everywhere. So take a moment and look at these spots and ask yourself, restrooms, 43% of American kids are afraid to use the school playgrounds and parks during recess. That's a hot button issue as well. Locker locations or hallways are a huge spot, and buses. I'm just going to ask you a question. Is there any commonality between those four spots? And if you begin to see commonality between those four spots, you can tune up your parenting and teachers listening. We can really do a difference in this. The first idea of where bullying is most likely to happen is in more congregated areas. But there's another one, like hallways. Why? Everybody together, so it's easier for a bully to get away with it. Second, where there's least adult supervision. That restroom, there isn't an adult in that, which is why we're now looking at kids going in pairs to school restrooms. Parks, yes. Recesses, yes. But it's why we tell our kids, don't go on the fringe of the parks. Don't play underneath the jungle gym. Don't play over underneath those trees because the adult can't see you. Instead, look where the adults are. In fact, one of the things we're asking adults to do recess is wear bright colored vests so a child can see that adult. Buses are a hot button issue. But if you ask a bus driver, where's the safe place to sit? Where's the least place to sit? He would say, don't have your child ever sit in the back of a bus. I can't monitor. Don't have your child sit behind me. I can't see behind me with a mirror. Best place? To the right of the bus in the front. So the first thing is, you may want to just quietly ask your child, where did this happen? And when did it happen? If you can find those two spots, always ask empathetically. Don't say he did a thing or what did you do? Don't ever ask that because he didn't do a thing. But if you can find out the where or the when, you can begin to create safety by having your child simply avoid the spot. By asking the teacher, can he go to the restroom during class time with a buddy because that's where he's being bullied? Talk to the bus driver. Can he sit on the front right-hand side? Can I pair him with a child who can be a mentor to watch over him? Playgrounds, don't play on the fringes. Play in the middle. Hallways. Some kids, particularly middle school or high school, going back and forth to that locker can be a deadly scenario if he's going by himself. So in as a special ed teacher, I used to always have extra spots of, the textbooks in my classroom so that child didn't have to go all the way by himself to go get those. Let's look at the next one. Strategy number 2 is once you help your child learn those hot spots areas and what to do, here's the next thing that you can do is besides just avoiding the hot spot is to teach your child to identify allies. Is there an ally that you can go to? Who's a person, like a teacher, that you can go to? I'm on number 2 again, Susan. The first really wonderful question you can always ask a child is, hey, in case you did have a problem, who would you go to? Very often the child will say school nurse. They love to go to the counselor, but very often the counselor may be busy. So this is why I always ask counselors, put a red index card outside your door. And if that card gets slipped under the door, stop everything and go out and help that child. Because very often the line is very huge. If you pair your child up with one other child he can stand next to, or maybe sometimes the school janitor can be an incredible ally. Every child needs a safety net. Make sure your child has a safety net. Who's the person you'll go to in case of a problem? Another thing you may want to do, just to make sure that he has an ally of a friend, have him make a map of the cafeteria. Just draw the cafeteria or if you don't have a cafeteria and you're sitting outside in benches, have him draw the benches. And then you just say to your child, where do you sit at lunch? Sometimes as kids get older, like in middle school, they don't sit by class. They sit by whoever you want to sit next to. And then you ask the key question, who are you sitting next to, or who sits around you? And if your child doesn't have anybody to sit around, what your goal as the parent is to find some kind of an ally, one child that your child can sit next to with or be with during recess time. It just, in more than anything else, creates security for a child. Another one you may want to do is teach your child what's called a safety plan, PLAN. I always use acronyms, particularly for special ed children, because it's easier for them to use them. But every one of these you can put on a small index card and keep them inside your child's backpack. And please, you would only teach one piece of plan, PLAN, at a time, till your child is comfortable and knows what to do. The first piece is pal up. Find one person you can be with. And it doesn't mean the entire day. Walk through the hall with, get to the bus with, go to as a teacher so that you can say, I'm having a problem. You're going to have to call that teacher and say, here's why he's coming to you, because he may not feel secure doing so. The palling up can be really helpful. Another thing that you can do is have your child let an adult know. Go and tell the teacher, or give a private signal between to set it up. Maybe it's your child walking in because he doesn't feel comfortable talking to the teacher in front of everybody. His ear. That means he needs safety, or something's happened and he really needs somebody to connect with him or just be with him. Anything that you can do to help that child know and that adult know. Avoid those hot spots. If you can avoid them altogether, that's wonderful. Or at least avoid the time when your child is most likely to be bullied. That's when you ask, where did it happen? And when did it happen? He may not know the first time it happened, but you'll begin to see the pattern. And the thing that you want to do is notice your surroundings. So that's hard to do with your little guy. But one thing that you can do is talk about situational awareness, is just help your child know that he's going to be looking for the child who's the bully, or he's going to be looking if there's an area that have an adult. If he starts to notice his surroundings, he's going to be more likely to be safe. Number 4 is teach strong body language. And this is a really interesting piece that you could start teaching your child actually around the age of 2 or 3. And I swear it's one of the most important things that we can help all of our kids learn the rest of their lives. This will help your daughter as she goes off to college, because what we've discovered is that after looking at hundreds of hours of footage up in Toronto elementary schools, what the researchers wanted to find out is which children were more likely to be picked on or bullied. After looking at hundreds of hours of footage, what they discovered is it had nothing to do with who was going to be picked on or bullied based on what they said or what they wore, but it was how they stood. Children who have wimpy body language, that's eyes down, shoulders down, just hands in pockets or behind them, kind of wimpier looking, are actually children who appear more vulnerable. Interesting point, doesn't work with every single bully, but children who are, or begin more vulnerable appearing are easier targets. So first thing you may want to do is teach your child from a very early age, always the color of the talker's eyes. And you just help your child starting at 2 and 3, look at your eyes as you're talking. Why? Well, first of all, it's going to help your child learn emotional illiteracy, which is a key trait of social emotional learning. But the other thing that's core is that it'll also help your child, if he looks at your eyes, holds his head up, and it'll begin to transfer it out into the playground. For my special ed rooms, I would tell a child, that may be threatening. Eye contact, look at the bridge between the nose. You'll never know the difference. Or between there's a spot behind you, and look behind you on that spot. Confident body language will take a long time and a lot of practice to role play, but can be a very helpful tool to help your child learn the next piece, which is teaching calm. Calm is going to be 4 steps. Back to the other slide again, Susan. 4 steps, and here we go. It's CALM. C is critical, and that is to teach child to stay cool. Is that easy? No. But Finland is finding the children who are particularly ADHD are usually stressed more easily. And if you can keep your body just calmer, what you actually will be able to do is be able to be less likely to be picked on. It may be you say to yourself inside your head, I need to calm down. I'm on 2 slides behind, Susan. It also could be that I just need to start practicing making my face look back and forth so it's not as upset looking. There are ways to do that when we're actually showing kids how to look in a mirror so they feel the emotions in parts. A is assert yourself. That is very difficult for an ADHD child to do, but one of the things that we can help them do is just learn to say, cut it out or stop it. And it may take quite a while to practice that. L is look the kid in the eye. So you're using strong body language. If you are going to say stop it, look them in the eye. And M is make your voice sound like you mean it. It's firm, strong language. Listen to my voice, you tell kids. Stop it. Stop it. Which do you think is going to help your friend? A wimpier voice or a strong voice? Not a crying voice. But we role play this back and forth with children until they finally get it, until they understand the kind of voice tone they need to use. Again, this is not easy. And please, parents, this is not okay, tonight I'm going to teach them these strategies. It's finding the level your child is at, and maybe it's learning nothing more than how to help you stay a little cooler and calmer. And if you can't do anything, then it's walk away. Another one that we really want to help our children do, and this is going to take a while, but we find that self-esteem is plummeting. With some of our children, depression can also mount because bullying becomes repeated and they feel like they deserve it. For some children who really at this point aren't able to use the calm strategy, stay cool, assert, look them in the eye, or sound like you mean it, then start with this strategy. And that is you just tell your child over and over, you did nothing to deserve this. You're a good, likable person. And one of the things you can do is actually help them learn to say inside their head, never out loud, but inside their head, I don't deserve this, or I'm a good person, or things will get better. I don't care what the refrain is. For some children, this self-talk does help. You'll have to first put it on an index card. Then you need to practice it over and over and over again until you finally can do it. Remember, most of the time, we parents are the ones who help our children be the example. We're the external monitor until they can finally do it on their own. Strategies. Those are the beginning strategies. What I then did as a special ed teacher is come up with working together. If my Joey in my room was also seeing the nurse, or he was seeing the counselor, or he was going to the speech teacher, he was also seeing you, we'd sit down at the conference in 3-way. And we'd put up, here's Joey's tools. One mom came up to me absolutely in tears saying, I never thought this would work, but I practiced these over and over again with Joey. I put them on my refrigerator. The counselor is helping him, or the speech therapist is helping him, or maybe it's grandma, whoever else is going to see your child at least once a week, who can help him practice one skill at a time, then gently add the next one. What you'll be able to do is help your child develop what's called assertive strategies that boost his confidence. They're the ones that help him be able to figure out what I'm going to do. Remember one other thing, that new behaviors take a minimum, parents, of around 21 days of repetition. With special ed children, it may take a lot longer. This may be a 6-month process. But you're better off to take one skill at a time than keep practicing it over and over and over by role-playing it. Children learn these skills, says UCLA and Duke, better from us not lecturing, but by showing them. Maybe you can take them to the park and say, oh, look at that little boy. He's using strong body language, or using a movie and then stop it on a frame and go, oh, look at her strong language. Oh, she was using a wimpy voice. What's a strong voice look like? If you track it of just one skill at a time in short little intervals based on your child's attention span till he finally begins to get it, you may also, some parents take photos of the child engaged in it. It helps him remember it. One mom said she took a cell phone picture of it and then she blew it up off of her printer and pasted it on her mirror so the child could see himself and remember it. It wasn't class to see. It was on his bathroom mirror, and another one was hidden inside his backpack. Find the strategy that works best for your child. Finally, one other thing that we may keep in mind is that some children aren't just victims, they're bullies. All of these strategies are in my books. I have a number of books out. I've been doing this for quite a while as a teacher and now a parent trainer and an educator. But the Unselfie, Why Empathetic Kids Succeed in Our All About Me World, just came out just 3 weeks ago, premiering on today's show, and it has everything in here. My website is Michele Borba. I'm on Twitter at Michele Borba. There's lots of strategies for you. Take a moment and enter your own questions for you. But let's just take one thing before we go on this and do that there is a flip to this. Yes, our children may be bullied. Not all of them, but some of them. But some of our children also may be bullying. If you ever have a teacher who says your child is beginning to use aggressive, cruel-like behaviors that are intentional, that would be bullying. Please don't think it's a phase. Sit down with the teacher immediately and say, so what's the plan on what we can do? Let your child know that he is being monitored, that you care desperately about your child, that isn't an acceptable behavior, because bullying is learned, but it can be unlearned. And it's up to a group of caring, committed teachers, parents to get on board together. My biggest concern is we're now seeing bullying starting at a much younger age, which means we're not intervening nearly enough and saying, no, that's not how we act. Let's do that again, and let's do it the right way. Let's make sure that we help everybody feel the best they can be. So thank you. I'm turning this back to you, Susan.
Okay. Before we start the questions, can you just talk a little bit more about your book? It sounds fascinating about empathy, and how do you think that are kids getting less empathetic in recent years, more, and how does this affect specifically kids with special needs like ADHD?
This has been the book of my lifetime. I spent 10 years researching this because around the year 2000, I saw one statistic that just fried me. And that is we now know we are looking at incoming college freshmen across the United States of America. Thousands of them in the last 30 years in any different college from different zip codes have been given the same little narcissism inventory. And what we discovered in the last 30 years, empathy, the ability to feel with another human being, has dipped 40% in American kids, while narcissism rates have increased 58%. Now, what are we looking at in a special education classroom? It's absolutely abominable. Because first of all, when empathy wanes, bullying goes up, cruelty goes up, dating violence goes up. All of those things that we hope that will never happen to our children go up. When we're looking at children who are most likely to be bullied, we now know that children on the spectrum, autism spectrum, are at the top of the list. I ask kids, and I've done thousands of in-services on who's the child most likely to be bullied. They say any child who is different. So what we're looking at is any child with ADHD is usually a prime suspect. Empathy, feeling with another, it's impossible to bully if you feel, how would I feel if that happened to me? Unselfie provides 9 habits that I discovered are absolutely core to be able to rebuild empathy with our kids. The habit that is most important for you would be the habit called anything regarding self-regulation. And I learned those from Navy SEALs. Fascinating studies. There's over 300 very practical solutions in there of practical ideas and ways that are all different habits that we can teach our kids. Make sure that you're also continuing to read, moral imagination, fabulous literature, Charlotte's Web, Stone, Fox, because not only does an ADHD child just love those and need them, but it also activates empathy.
That's a great suggestion to come up with books that teach empathy. It sounds like a fascinating book. I'm going to go out and grab it. Some of the questions that are coming in are interesting ones. Lots of parents have problems with kids that just won't talk about it. So one parent has a very specific example where she was finally told by another parent what was going on with her child, and repeatedly tried to get her child to talk about it, and he would not. And others are saying, it's just really hard to get your child to admit that this is going on. What's going on there, and what can parents do about that?
Well, Susan, I'm so glad that question came up, because any parent who asks that question, you are not alone. What we actually have done is surveyed hundreds of kids, and the majority of kids starting at around third grade say they don't come to their parent and tell. Now, why? Number one, they're embarrassed. They say that they're very embarrassed and they're afraid to admit it. Humiliation is huge. They're very afraid of retaliation. I think that's a really important point for us to take a moment and empathize with our kids. They're afraid that we will make things worse because we're so irate with how could this happen to my child, that the first thing we want to do is just barrel down to that classroom and go and shake that kid, in their shoulders. Any child is bullying our child. Very often what we discovered, it actually can make things worse. We need to create safety. So how do you get your child to talk about it? There's a couple of ways that we found are safer. First is, don't ask your child, are you being bullied? Look and know the signs. The signs are critical that you know them. Second of all, do it the flip question. Gee, I'm noticing bullying is a big problem. Look at this article that just came out in the newspaper today and describe what bullying is. Is this happening to any of your friends? If you flip it, some kids will be more likely to answer if it isn't happening to them, but it's happening to another friend. Find safer ways to talk about it. If you can find, if your child has a buddy or a friend in the classroom, mother over, sit down together and watch a movie. Like for little kids, it could be Dumbo. For bigger kids, it could be Mean Girls. And we find that a lot of times this is a digital-driven group of kids who really will relate better to a movie. So once you get done with the movie, wow, that was bullying. Gosh, let's figure out is that happening to you?
Right.
Yeah, but instead, what strategies when we use in case it happens?
Okay, that's really interesting. And how about people on the webinar also reporting problems trying to report this to the school, either the teacher not believing them, or my own personal experience with one of my younger children who was bullied was too scared or shy to talk to the teacher. And when I tried to talk to the teacher, she said to me, I can only listen to this if it comes from the child herself. I can't take, I can't take this information as third-hand information from you. So, how is it best to get through to a teacher, and what do you want to ask the teacher to do? I mean, I guess it's as a parent, that's just always such an issue.
Susan, it's a huge issue, and it's a big issue that's happening all over. So here's some strategies. Number one strategy is, remember I said keep a record. And there's a reason for it. Not only are you keeping a record of when did it happen, and there's actually 4 questions that you ideally are trying to get. Your child may not be the child who can give you these questions, which is why you may want to get it from another parent. Sometimes they're the ones that come to you. Or another friend, the bus driver, another teacher, somebody else. But you want to say, when did it happen? Where did it happen? Who was involved? And how did somebody respond, or what, so that you get the parameter of it. What you really want to know is who was there, because you may need evidence from somebody else, of another child, to come in and sit down. What we're seeing is that very often a teacher won't believe it, because in reality, it's not happening in front of her. Remember, most bullying happens when a teacher's backs are turned or in a location where they're not there. So that becomes trickier and trickier for the parent. Usually, the next thing is your school, because 50 states have now signed anti-bullying policies. Every public school must have an anti-bullying policy in place, and ideally on the school's website is a place where to report bullying. If it's not there, then go one step more and just quietly ask the principal. I'm noticing there isn't a report form. If bullying is happening, how do I report it to you? Find out whether or not they're even giving that. And if your child is too shy, then be an advocate. Then let's go together. Do a 3-way conference and see if that'll help. Because the teacher must listen to that child. And if the child is legitimately, most kids can't open up and say it to the teacher. But if you're there, or the person who is the other advocate is there, the three of you may be able to get the information aside, but worst come to worst, the child at least needs to know where's the safety net of somebody at that school I can go to who's going to give me a feeling of security.
That's ultimately what we did in this case. We had a three-way meeting with me, my child, and the teacher, and we were able to. But what came up there, and that my specific experience, this is also being mentioned by people posting on the board, is what's the best way to handle a bully in terms of the parents of the bully. Some people are telling stories about going to the parents of the bully and having the parents not believe them or not believe that their child was a bully. Yeah. Should you as a parent do that, or should you leave that to the school? And how do you handle, when there's a specific child who and whose parents bullying your child?
Well, here's the problem. And they've actually surveyed parents across the board. In fact, the PTA did a survey of it, and it was a half and half spread. The reason is that half the parents said when they tried to go to the bully, a lot of bullies' parents are bullies and will throw up their arms and go, it's your kid's problem, not mine, which is why it's back to evidence, creating a safety plan, maybe avoiding a particular bus route, anything that you can do. Second of all, it's almost always, if there's any kind of a legal issue involved, in some cases, you go up a notch. You need to save evidence, particularly in cyberbullying, or if there's any kind of extortion involved. So you get involved in the scenario. Find one educator at that school site who will support you. And if that educator at that school site will not support you, even though you've tracked it, you have the evidence, then you go up the notch and up the notch and up the notch. You may have to go to the district office. You may have to go to the superintendent. But you need to take it very, very seriously because we're looking at children's emotional and physical needs at stake. That said, anytime you can ask your child who else was there, that can be one more witness can be very, very helpful in the scenario.
Right. Okay. That's a good suggestion. This is a question coming from a couple of people on the webinar also. What can you ask of the school? One person says, my child's been bullied. We're going back to school soon. The principal knows about it and has tried to help, but what can I specifically ask of the school? And there are teachers on this webinar too who are saying, what can I do as a teacher to help a child who's being bullied?
Oh, I'm so glad. First of all, hopefully, remember, bullying is almost always a repeated behavior, which means if a child moves from one school to another, usually he's bullied again there. That's the Phoebe Prince problem. Remember that? The child who is horrible. We know that. The second thing is, if he was bullied last year, chances are he will continue to be bullied this year, which is why first day of school, if not before school starts, hold a very positive conference. You ask for the teacher who will be involved in it, maybe the teacher last year who was a supportive ally, who realized there was the problem, can be in the conference. Ask for no more than 15 minutes or 20 minutes of time and go with index cards with notes that are clearly there. Here's and the principal. But what you really want is to sit and say, this was a horrific problem last year. We are concerned that it will continue. We want my child to have, and I know you do too, the best possible school year. What can we do to create a safety plan for my child? Then listen, because if they're not creating a safety plan, then you're going to have a problem the rest of the time. Listen to see who your allies are, and then say, when's the best time I can track this? Because if your child's in physical or emotional distress, you don't wait. You immediately go and keep getting help until your child finally has some kind of a safety plan. The fascinating thing when I talk to high school kids, I say to them, where's the place that you're most likely to go to if you've been bullied? Surprisingly, the number one spot they say is the school library. And I say, what's going on with the school library? They say, first of all, it's quiet. You can breathe. Librarians are strict and they watch you, and bullies don't read. So it was like some of our kids, they know a place to go, and that's what every child needs and deserves, is a place to go to feel safe.
Right, absolutely. Here's Jen says, what do you do when the school wants a witness? And this is something that I experienced also, Jen. And the bully has a group of friends that back him up and say the bullying never happened.
At that point, what happens is The fascinating thing is, if I was to give every school in the United States of America the best tip of what to do to stop bullying, every school must have a report box. It is a simple box with a lock and the key on the top that nobody can get into. You put several of them in big schools around, and daily what principals are to do is get into the box and open it up and unlock it. You then read the reports. What are on the reports? Anonymous reporting of other kids. I saw Johnny being bullied today. Here was the kids involved. When children have the anonymous reporting option possibility, some schools have this on websites. What begins to happen is educators now have a pattern. They begin to see, hey, this is happening repeatedly. There's other kids who are saying this is a problem. Without that reporting box option, or a reporting box option in your, on your online, which the police departments in most cities are setting up for schools. Here's how to report a bullying problem. You track those, and what you'll begin to see is anytime you, the parent, go in and the parent and the principal says there's no witnesses, you can say, have you read the reporting boxes? And there are clearly witnesses there. That's the best way. We also know to stop a school shooting.
Right.
It's very simple. It does not cost a dime.
And is that going into place in schools around the country? What's your sense of how that's being received?
Well, every time that I work in hundreds of schools, I have another book coming out in actually 2 weeks from now. It's called The 6 R's of Bullying Prevention. And it is for educators only. It'll say if you do these 6 R's, you will dramatically reduce bullying. And one of those R's is you must give reporting options. I'll blog it again. It also is in my website.
Okay.
But I'm telling you, it is so simple. And the other thing that's really very important is that some kids who are witnesses will not use the reporting box for fear that the bully is watching them. So we make a new rule that when you use a reporting box, it could be sitting there on the library or sitting in the secretary's office, and it always has a lock and key on it. You can also report nice things that are happening. So a bully doesn't know if you're reporting nice things. If Johnny said, invited me to have lunch with him today, or Johnny's trying to beat me up after school on the bus. The bully doesn't know the difference, and principals, the savvy ones, then report over the loudspeaker once a week, hey, here's some more kids who are caught being darn right nice, and we want more of those kids at our school site.
Oh, that's great.
Dramatically reduces bullying.
Okay. Here is something from Karen, and there are other people who have similar comments. Her son has a diagnosis of both Asperger, ASD, and ADHD, and he's definitely being bullied. But he has angry outbursts, and someone else posted something similar, and he's the one who ends up getting punished because often the more sophisticated bully, as she puts it, skates by. Any suggestions? I mean, I think that's a pretty common situation, provoking a kid who doesn't have coping skills into bad behavior and then sort of skating by. Great term, Karen, skating by.
It's exactly what is happening in too many cases because the angry outburst is very typical with a lot of kids, which is why we have got to create safety nets for kids in schools. In any school who is an emotionally safe, or what I call an empathy building, I'm trying to create unselfish schools. And those are schools that create an empathy base, that creates safe havens for kids. What we do, the first thing we do is create in classrooms, places where kids can go as a calm down corner within seconds. If you know that I'm more likely to get an outburst because there's that crowded, that's what most kids tell me, the hallway's so crowded, I can't get my hands in my pockets, or somebody gives me a dirty look and I just flare out. We need to create counselors are fabulous at creating strategies to help kids slowly learn to control the outburst or go seconds before it starts to really, really build. That's really the only hope we've got, is really helping create safety nets for kids at school sites.
Right. Okay. Yep.
It's called educating. You really need to get on board and take the perspective of the kids. The most interesting thing that I saw a parent do recently on that is that the first day of school for a young child, what they actually did is wrote a letter to the teacher from the viewpoint of the child. Hi, my name is, and the child had selective mutism. It is really scary for me to set up and talk in front of class. I hate to raise my hand. She described all the characteristics of it, so please help me so I feel safe in the classroom.
Oh, that's
you could
great.
do the same thing. I've seen a parent do the same thing for the angry outburst. Help me, because I can't keep my anger inside. One of the most brilliant special ed teachers actually had a red top of the child's desk, and when that poker chip got moved to the front, the child could slowly begin to feel it. Man, that took months. The teacher immediately helped that child learn how to calm down and cool, and went off to a cool down corner. But there was no punishment involved. It was, thank you for letting me know you're almost at the breaking point.
That's really interesting. We have a letter on our website, which is a sample letter to your child's teacher about ADHD. It's written in the voice of the child. It's one of the most popular downloads on our site. So I can see that tool could be used in many other situations, such as bullying. It's a great one. That's a really helpful suggestion. Maybe we should come up with a package of sample letters that people can use. Let's see. I love this question because I'm firm believer in this from Dr. Kessler. What do you think about these boys and girls learning self-defense or martial arts training to reduce bullying? And I just want to say here that my own daughter, who was bullied in second and third grade, did learn Taekwondo. And I think as a result of that, she developed just the body skill that you're talking about, Michele. She began to convey with her body, buzz off, and it really worked. It really did. And I think it was the Taekwondo that did it, because I didn't know enough to teach it to her. So what do you think about self-defense or martial arts?
I am a firm believer in anything that's going to help a child develop confidence and assertiveness. The concern is be very careful on which classes you choose, because many schools have this zero tolerance for. So what happens a lot of times is the kid stands up for himself who's been bullied. He kicks the kid because that's what he's learned. And who's the kid who gets suspended is your child, not the other child. So I think anything that you can do of learning strong body, that seems to be a core piece. Feeling assertive so you can hold your own is a wonderful piece. And then help your child learn when to use it. And certainly, if you need to, and you're going to I will be and defend you. If you had to do this because everybody else was physically harming you and that's the only way you could defend yourself, I'm there for you. But know that you may have a problem with it. That's the other issue I'm really concerned about, this zero tolerance of kick the kid out.
Yeah, in my daughter's case, she didn't actually kick anyone, but she developed a stance of power, which you learn in Taekwondo, to take that stance. So I think it was just the kind of power body language that you're talking about, which I think was super helpful. Can we talk a little bit, just as we're winding down here, about how, because there's lots of interest in this topic, how do you train bullies so that to change their behavior? What do you suggest to the teacher? A couple of teachers here who have bullies in their classroom will let you know what to do. And what are some of the techniques? I know we have no time to do this justice, but
well, the answer is empathy. Because what happens is the more a child begins to, we actually know this because I'm working in the field of learning violence and becomes violentization. So what you really want to do, until what begins to happen is the child uses and uses and uses the aggressive behavior until not only it works, he begins to see it's acceptable, and then his empathy begins to go down, and that's a very dangerous trend. First thing you want to do, and we should all do together, is help our children develop a caring mindset so they see themselves as a caring person. We're so fast to always praise our kids for their grades or their tenacity or their grit, and we're not so good to be able to praise them for, oh, that was so compassionate, that was so kind. So the first thing is, if any teacher out there is bullying, start slowly beginning to give children evidence that they are a caring person. It's a quick fix, but you'll have to look for it and then begin to honor that and say, that was caring because. Number two is give him actual opportunities to do good. Usually in my classroom, it was not pairing him up with the same age child, but go down to the kindergarten class and teach that kindergartner listening skills, or something the older child who was bullying actually needed to learn, but he didn't know how to do. But we didn't say that. That kindergartner really is struggling and needs listening skills. Or conflict. What we know, the other thing about a child who is bullying, you must monitor him. You must let that child know that he will be monitored because that behavior is unacceptable. And you will be in close contact with, particularly in middle school, all the rest of the other teachers so they're all on board together. But then find him opportunities so he sees himself as a good human being. The American Academy of Pediatrics would also say, teach him restorative justice or conflict resolution skills. Never to use with a child who's bullied. Never put a bully and a child who's bullied in a conflict resolution scenario, because the bullied child, that isn't a conflict. He has nothing to do with that. It's about cold-blooded contempt. But we do know that children who bully very often have not only learned aggressive behavior, but they also are very weak in problem-solving skills.
Wow, interesting. Michele, this has been just incredibly helpful. And everyone, I cannot speak highly enough about Michele Borba's books. Extraordinary resource for parents, all parents, and especially parents with challenges that our kids have. So check out MicheleBorba.com and her books, and this new one sounds really super. So thank you so much for fitting us in. Sounds like you've been on a pretty busy book tour. We're grateful for your time. And thanks again, everyone, for being here today. And thank you so much for you, Michele, for all your time and your expertise and sharing it.
Thank
really
you.
Grateful. Thank you so much. Bye, everyone.
For more Attitude podcasts and information on living well with attention deficit, visit attitudemag.com. That's ADDITUDEMAG.com.